Welcome to episode 4 of the Three Brothers Movie Podcast. Today we are talking about Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, released in 1964. It is a political satire about nuclear war, and the film starts off somewhat seriously but gets ridiculous as the film progresses. Joining us today is Ricardo Rodriguez. He is a friend of mine. He has a channel of his own. Check it out if you'd like to. He's going to be talking today. So let's just get started with the opening scene. First of all, like, the movie is partially serious, but overall, like, there's just this little bit of funniness to it. It's like if there was like a military general that you saw, but his fly was down.
Yeah,
that's basically the summary of the movie.
Okay,
yeah,
that's a great way to put it.
Now, coming from someone who this is my first time watching this movie.
All of us had already seen it, but this first time.
Yeah, it took me at least halfway through that opening for me to realize, oh wait, this is like sexual.
Yeah.
You know, you have the fuel like hose thing dropping onto the other plane, refueling, and I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, try a little tenderness is playing.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's all subtle, but yeah, when you think about it.
Like the wide shots, it like looks like the other planes are humping each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
I honestly really envied the fact that this was your first time seeing this movie, because I remember the first time I watched this, I just was like, I think I'm in love. Like, I've never seen a movie like this before. I
gotta cherish the first time that I saw this with Gavin, because I remember at first he did not get it, but like... Yeah, as the film progressed, it took a long time, and I remember it was when Jack Ripper first said fluids. That was when you just said, what? You were confused, and as it progressed, you started laughing a lot more. For most of the movie,
I wasn't really into it. I was like, it didn't really seem like, I guess, my kind of movie, because it was very serious, very down-to-earth. It seemed like a very serious war movie. And I was like, it's not really seems like a generic kind of 50s war movie. And then... Ripper said fluids as his motivation. I was like, wait a minute, what the hell is happening?
Yeah. That's the movie. It's partially serious, but like at the same time, it's got these little isms that just make it really funny. And that's what the opening credits do. They establish things like the opening crawl at first says, like, you know, this couldn't happen in real life, like, we have safeguards, and it also says, like, the people in here are not meant to represent anybody in real life. And then after that, it talks about, like, the Doomsday Machine, which is context of the film. Then the opening credits are just like, yeah, if you pay attention, you're like, this is a sex scene told by planes.
I love how, like, the planes are super serious, and then you get the music in the background, and then you get these messy title crawls.
Yeah,
like, it looks like someone scrawled it on like a note,
like coffee shop font.
That was exactly how you described it. It's a perfect way. Like, that's the movie. There's progressions like that. Yeah,
that's the funny thing though, is like if you look at the opening title crawl, and then you cut to the opening credits where you have the planes, it really sets up the context of when this movie was released. This is in the middle of the 60s, in the height of the Cold War. So this is arguably one of the first times that a major movie essentially made light of what was the serious subject at the time. Like, nobody was making movies like this. No one was making light of mutually assured destruction.
Exactly.
Like, this was the first time that someone was like, oh, this is crazy.
Like, Stanley Kubrick has some stones on him to, like, literally poke fun at nuclear war.
Like the war movies of the day, or like movies in general, they would be like, oh, the communists and, you know, Red Fear and all that. They would just bring light to the enemy. They wouldn't bring light to the bad possibility of, everyone could possibly die.
They kind of looked at it like a we versus them, instead of like, no one wins in this scenario. We're all screwed if this happens.
And that's the giant joke at the end when the Russian ambassador is trying to take a picture of the big board, and you're like, the entire world is gonna blow up in 15 seconds. It's like,
Richardson's laying out like how the communists could invade the mine.
They could have a backup plan for after everything's already destroyed.
So if you think about that, like, all the Americans are screwed now because the Russians are going to come in and steal all the mine shafts.
Rick, you know what you just said? You pointed something out. I just realized that this movie is based on a real book called Red Alert.
Yeah.
Ooh.
How funny is it that a book that essentially was a part of the Red Scare is almost completely ignoring the Russians in this scenario.
Yeah.
Almost the entire movie is dedicated to what the Americans are doing.
Yeah, there's the only one Russian on screen, and then other than that,
Dmitri.
you have Dmitri on the phone, and he never says anything.
We never see him.
Right.
Yeah.
We never hear him. We never see him. We don't even know what he.
You know what? I realized this movie is pretty much like that. You know that Charlie Brown football thing where like you're running toward it, you think you're gonna hit it, then whoosh, fall back. That's what this is. You think it's gonna be serious, and next you whoosh, you fall back.
Yeah.
Done. Yeah, the comedy in this movie, it's very subtle the way it builds, but like there's hints of comedy throughout the entire way. There's hints of sex. It's all about like the execution, and the execution for this movie is freaking perfect.
Isn't the first shot like after the title card on matte painting?
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I was just saying that's cool.
That is cool. All right, let's get into performances here with Peter Sellers. He plays 3 separate characters in this movie. He plays
Almost played 4.
Exactly. He was going to play Kong, but he plays Mandrake, he plays the President of the United States, and he plays Dr. Strangelove. And all of them are hilarious in different ways because they are all different characters. He's not Peter Sellers playing someone else.
If you weren't really paying attention that much, it would be hard to tell.
Yeah, this is, as I said, my first time watching, I did not even notice that until you guys pointed it out, that, Mandrake, the President, and then Dr. Strangelove were all played by the same guy. He did such a good job.
Because they're also very different, and they sound so very different, too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the first time I didn't know he was the President. That was the one thing that I had to look up, and I remember being like, whoa. Right. I was a little bit surprised, but yeah, other than that, he's hilarious as everybody. Yeah, Mandrake, he's the one straight man of the movie, pretty much. Like, he's the one guy who's, like, kind of rising above everything. Like, he's in there with Jack Ripper the entire time, and he's just, like, kind of, like, slightly laughing, slightly crying, just, like,
Right.
And it's like he's the one guy who's like is seeing everything as like kind of a normal person would, like a normal human, where everyone else is like a cartoon villain.
He's like if someone from the audience watching the movie was plucked and put into that world, and like they were gonna be stuck there forever, and now they're just kind of like, oh no, I'm stuck. Everyone's stupid. I need to save the world somehow. That's pretty much what Mandrake is. That's
honestly, I had never thought about this, but you were pointing out the idea that like he's sort of the one guy that's like seeing things outside of the bubble of everyone else's insanity. It's funny that he's an RAF guy. He's not American. He's British.
Yes.
And he's there. Like I think General Ripper describes him as like the like officer collaboration program. Like he's there essentially on like a collaborative mission with the British and the U.S. government, like working together. So he's literally a fish out of water or country. So of course it would make a lot of sense that he's like seeing this like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, he's not even involved. Yeah, he's the only British person. If you, it's the Americans and the Russians.
Yeah,
and remind me, is Sellers is a British actor, isn't he?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
yeah, he's a British actor, but strangely enough, he's playing a Brit, he's playing an American, and he's playing a Nazi.
Yeah, and all of them are the extreme end of the spectrum. Like, the Mandrake has this very distinctive accent. Like literally, Dr. Strangelove is a Nazi whose right arm is constantly trying to heil. And, he played the President of the United States, who's, like, somewhat awkward. And,
I was surprised. He actually did a really good American accent for the President.
And this is a really subtle thing, but I know that plenty of movies have tried to do this, and oftentimes I think they fail because they put too much focus on it. I love how they shoot scenes where Sellers is playing off of himself.
Yeah.
Like when the President and Strangelove are talking to one another, you don't really notice the sleight of hand.
Yeah, there's the scene where Turgidson is laying out everything which is happening, and you can see Dr. Strangelove in the background.
Yes, I saw that.
I did
with
see
the
that.
crazy hair.
You can see that that's not Peter Sellers. That they dress someone else up as him. But yeah, you have conversations that he has directly with the President, and you're like, these were not filmed at the same time. Like, he was talking to air. Right. And you're like, he still plays it off well.
And it's surprising, like, how good an actor you have to be to, like, literally play off yourself when you're not there.
Right.
That's surprising.
At different junctures, yeah. Like, he plays all of his characters excellently. George C. Scott, this guy is astonishing.
He's my favorite. I love everyone in this movie, but he has a special place in my heart for how deliciously silly he is.
He's kind of the cross in between. Like, he's one step above Mandrake, where he's like, like you described like football as being like the tactics that are like on display in the
Right.
room, where like this doesn't feel like something politician would be doing. I'm like, that's what he is. He's like the jock, like, you know,
he's
quarterback
he's
type
the
of guy.
He's the like beer chugging dad
Right.
at all the parties. Like, yeah, they're going.
Exactly.
That's the funny thing. He's not going to the games himself. He's going to his friend's living room, but he's still like painting his face, wearing the jersey. Like he's like full on like.
He has the dad bod and everything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's hysterical
I
to watch
especially
him.
love this because he doesn't actually want like an all-out nuclear war to happen on on U.S. soil, but he does kind of want to destroy Russia.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, he just
I
kind of
love that scene where like he's describing the plane, like the U.S. plane that's gonna invade Russia.
Right.
And he's like saying like it's amazing, it's gonna plow through, and then like at the end he's like the president's like very flustered. He's like, "Are you telling me there's a chance that it could get through?" He's like, "Chance, you darn!" And then he kind of realizes it's just like, wait a minute,
Right.
one of my
that plane gets through.
something even more subtle, which I absolutely love, is when he's reading the transcript from Ripper, and then he like, you know, Ripper mentions that line, and like, you sure as hell won't stop them now, and he's like, and then he just keeps moving on. It's just like that one little bit where he's like, you know, I'm kind of liking this guy.
But there's something funny about the fact that he kind of enjoys what's happening.
Yeah.
He kind of enjoys the thrill of war with the how does he describe the ambassador, like degenerate atheistic commies.
That was so hilarious. He's like, what are you saying to me? He just goes all out.
And he's upfront about it. He's not trying to hide it anymore.
No.
He's not trying to hide it like maybe Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah.
He's like upfront that he hates communists.
Yes.
He hates that the Russian ambassador is there.
Yeah, I like
Gosh.
He's gonna take pictures
Hey, Dan.
of the big board.
Dan, could you reiterate that story about the actor and how he was fooled into playing this
Right.
character?
So
This is one of those movies where it's so cool to read about it, because like there's a story behind this movie, just like there's
Yes.
with a lot of Kubrick movies like The Shining. But yeah, that you can go on with the story.
there was this great story I read about George C. Scott, who played Turgison, really wanted to play the character as serious. Like, he's a military man, he's going to treat this as a serious issue. And Kubrick wanted him to ham it up a bit, make it a little more silly. And Scott was really firm, like, I'm not going to do this. So he's like, okay, I'll play you in chess. And the context is Kubrick was really well renowned for being a great chess player, but so was Scott. So when they would face off, it'd be this huge epic exchange. The whole cast would be interested in it. And the rule was, if Kubrick won the match, Scott would do the take Kubrick wanted. And over time, they finally worked out a deal where they would do a bunch of serious takes that Scott wanted to do, but Kubrick always got one silly take. And initially, George C. Scott was under the impression that, okay, I'm getting this out of my system so he can just leave me alone, but they're just going to use the serious takes. When he initially saw the movie and realized they used almost all of his silly takes exclusively, he was not very amused. Because this is the guy that played Patton in Patton. Like, this is a serious, like, man's man actor. He wasn't well known for this. And I did read an interview later that indicated that Scott had warmed to the movie over time and realized that, as annoyed as he was to have been lied to, he did really appreciate the fact that it was actually, he considered it one of his better performances when he looked back on his career.
Yeah, Kubrick has a way of making his actors dislike him. Like, he doesn't really have a way with people as much, but yeah, his
I
films
was
are
going to
great.
say that. He doesn't really have a good track record when it comes
Like,
to
a story
pleasing people.
a story that I heard, the scene where, I forgot the actor's name, but remember the character in Full Metal Jacket, his name was it Wolf Mother or something like that? Or Animal Mother, remember? The character.
How late in the movie?
He's the blonde guy, short hair.
Was it when we get to Vietnam or before?
Yeah, it was the scene where where Joker meets up with his friend. Like, you know, they're like go to Vietnam, and then you see that one guy who's like playing with a dead body and all that.
Oh,
Yeah,
right.
that scene. It's the guy who says, "Can you walk the walk?" Anyways, that actor, right? They were shooting a bunch of scenes, and they were like on the 90th take, and the guy was so pissed. He was like, "Geez," or like something along the. He was I think he made fun of Stanley to an extent, and then Stanley was just like, why don't you just act a little better? And then, yeah. Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah, he doesn't have a good track record.
Certainly not, but
Isn't it funny how, I think we've talked about this before, Evan, like, some of my favorite directors have been complete jerks to, like, their cast.
Yeah.
Like, there's something about, like, I love Alfred Hitchcock, but he treated his actresses really poorly in some productions.
Charlie Chaplin was the
Charlie
same way.
Chaplin, like, it's funny how, like, you can have some guys that are tremendous filmmakers, but how did Hitchcock put it? Like, he was being interviewed about a comment that he had said about actors, and he's like, let me correct you. I did not say that actors should be treated like cattle. I said that they should be treated as though they were cattle or something like that. Like, just
crap.
stone cold.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Kubrick, he's interesting. All right, let's get into Sterling Hayden here. Oh my gosh. He is Mandrake is the straight man, like, in a rational sense, in terms of, like, his line of thinking.
Right.
But Sterling Hayden plays his role straight, even though he is arguably the most ridiculous character in the movie, even more than Dr. Strangelove.
He essentially plays his role the way Scott probably wanted to play it.
Yeah.
Like, dead serious, but the only difference is every word coming out of his mouth is insane.
Yes.
Well, like, it couldn't possibly be taken seriously, but he does. Like, there's that whole buildup to the bodily fluids line, which is what makes it hilarious. That entire scene is tense. Like, he pulls a gun, and then that last line, just like, what in the hell?
And it's laying out the motivations of a character. Like, when you see something like this, especially from the beginning scenes, you think it's very serious. So you assume the villain, or at least the antagonist, like, has some sort of serious, macho, like, terrible motivations.
Right.
Like he has some deep-seated fear or hatred of commies or something like that. But then you just learn that he's just afraid that communists are going to purify his bodily fluids.
Right.
With fluoride.
Oh gosh, yeah. All the scenes with him and Mandrake are hysterical. And it's like, it just... You have to be a great actor to not laugh. I don't know if he was, like, literally just that, like, stoic and, like...
That scene
like,
for the bodily fluids, it's a one take, and it, like, goes on for, like, 5 minutes.
Right.
I have no idea how in the back of his mind he didn't just, like, say bodily fluids and crack up.
I'd love to see gag reels if they're out there of him just with the cigar and just like,
I think, you know what, I just realized Sterling Hayden had been in a Kubrick movie. He was in
The Killing.
The Killing.
Yes.
Sellers had been in Lolita, I think.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, and
everybody else, I think, is new to Kubrick.
Most hilarious thing, I don't know if I told you this before, in Lolita, he plays a role where he's actually, like, disguising himself as different people to, like, some of his role. And he acts as a psychiatrist in one scene with heavy accent, and he dresses himself up to look differently. I'm like, he played Dr. Strangelove in a Kubrick movie before he was Dr. Strangelove. And I just laughed at the irony of that.
I love it.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So yeah, they were both in the movies beforehand, but yeah, like, it's so funny. We were talking about how he doesn't have a way, like, there aren't really any actors who, like, worked in, like, all of Kubrick's movies. He kind of, like, it was kind of like, 2 movies maybe they'd be in, but, like, I don't think there are actors who are in, like, 3 or 4 of his movies. Like, not too many.
Oh,
and
wait.
Go, yeah.
Wait, so the his name is what was it again? Jack D. Ripper?
That's right.
Ripper.
Wait, what was the actor's name again?
Sterling Hayden.
Yeah, Sterling Hayden. So I feel like in the movie when he pulls out that golf, like, he pulls out a golf, like, toting thing with a machine gun, and I feel like that's, like, a perfect representation of his character. Something so normal on the outside, but next, no, it's just, like, completely insane on the inside.
That's a great way to put it.
He's the full-out American
clip
with
instead of
that.
the little thing with the balls.
Exactly, then he just pulls it out just like it's on the side. Yeah, that's exactly it, man. It's like the straight American, like, couldn't be more macho, but inside is just, like, insanity.
Yeah.
American sport.
And last key character, because seriously, like, the funniest thing is that the war room, like there's like 20 people in there, and like 16 don't even say anything.
When you get this wide of the table's just huge. It's, like, ridiculous. Like, I can't remember who did the production design. They had it in the credits, but one of the strange things that I don't usually think of in a movie is I'm like, this production design's incredible.
Yeah, the set, like it's really good how they use it because it's all just this one big old room.
Right.
But like they use it to its greatest extent, and
the way that they use light, like this is a black and white movie. There's something really amazing about how they use light and shadow. Like I remember there was this shot after a more like lighthearted moment in the movie happens, and then you just cut as the dialogue continues to Dr. Strangelove in his wheelchair in the shadows, just lurking there. And it's just like, that's really sinister looking. Like
I remember Gavin said when he was watching the movie, he was like, I've been wondering this entire time why the movie's called Dr. Strangelove.
Right.
And I'm like, it's a shot that's supposed to suggest that. It's very interesting, yeah. But the last character up who's really important is Kong, and because that's the thing. This movie's told from 3 points of view. It's told from the war room. It's told from Burleson Air Force Base, and then on the plane. There's this one bomber that's like that we're following, and it's the important bomber because it gets attacked by a missile and it damages the communication on board. So basically, they can't stop it at the very end. So you follow them the entire way through till them actually detonating the bomb and essentially ending the world. But
it's really funny how. We're going to talk about this a little later, but how there are certain points of view in the movie that are played more serious than others. Like the whole movie as a whole is pretty absurd, but everything on the airplane is pretty straight-laced war movie.
Yeah.
Like everything from like the very like mechanical way they would go through all like the safety checks and things of that sort. Like
I was talking to you about this. Like Stanley Kubrick often does not use close-ups of items in his movies. Like it'll always be close-ups of faces or of like kind of around the characters. But in that, like every time they push a button or flick a lever, it's always a close-up and zooms too, which are like pretty much never seen for items in his movies. So he. Like, all the details are important when it comes to the plane, and it's played as that, except for the fact that inside of the safe, with all the top secret plans, there are pictures of women in bikinis on there. So
and I think you had actually talked about this before we had started, like, just how really funny that is.
The fact that they put pictures of women in the top secret vault that needs a code, right? Shows just how much they go into there and look.
Right.
Yeah. Because like that's you see them at the beginning, they're just kind of hanging out, like that's their job. They're just there to like do something which is probably not gonna happen, but they need to be prepared for it. Yeah. And Kong on here, he is hysterical. Like he, like you said it, like he wasn't really like a main actor. Like he was someone who kind of
he was a John Wayne type. Like when you see him in a cowboy hat and you see him using that like thick Texas accent, that was who Slim Pickens was. He was basically just playing himself in a movie, and he's so authentic.
Yes.
It's funny.
Exactly.
It's not that he's like playing it up. Like obviously like Dr. Strangelove is a very played up character, and the absurd level of just like cranking it up to 11 is what's funny. With honestly with Kong, I was just laughing as I was just like, he just seems genuinely like that guy.
Yeah.
And I think one of my favorite scenes in the movie, relating to Kong at least, is when they pull out like the emergency thing.
Right.
And it's just a box, and it starts off pretty good. It's like ammunition, gun,
Rations.
And then it goes in like rations and like certain pills,
5
for, like,
stockings,
sleeping. And then it starts going on like the different types of pills. Like you got sleeping pills, you got like tranquilizer pills, and there's just like more absurd pills all the time. And then you go into the even more absurd stuff. You like have a little tiny book that's like Holy Bible and like Russian
9
phrases.
packs of gum.
9 packs of gum, like lipstick, stockings, and then Kong kind of like points out the absurdity. Is like, you could have a good time in Vegas with all this stuff.
And I have a great story to go with that, because this movie came out in 1964, not long after President Kennedy was shot in Dallas.
Yeah.
And the original line in that scene was, you could have a pretty good week in Dallas with that. So they actually, there were a couple of changes they had to make to the movie because they had unintentionally made references that would have been very not funny in the context of a national tragedy of that sort.
Yeah. So stuff like that.
Oh, man.
Interruption that we're gonna have to go.
Honestly, like I really want to hear more from you, because this is your first experience with this movie. Like, what's the stuff that like stood out to you from these characters the most? Like, all of us went into this like knowing who these characters were and loving them kind of from the start.
I like how he, if you think about it, when he introduces each character, he makes sure you really get to know this character in like 1 minute, I'd say. Like when you first meet Dr. Strangelove, he's all awkward and stuff, and then
pulls out the wheelchair.
Yeah, he pulls out the wheelchair, and then you also see that there's something wrong with his right hand.
His right
hand, it's like all twitchy and stuff. You're like, whoa, what's that?
He's got one glove on it, and he doesn't have a glove on the other hand.
and you right there, you get him, and then with what's his name again? I only know his character name, which is Jack D. Ripper. Yeah. But with Sterling Hayden. Yeah. But you meet him and he's like all serious. He's like, yeah, I'm for the people. And then next you know, he brings up fluids for no reason, and you're like, whoa, hold up. And right there, you get the character. And then same with I just like how he does. Oh, especially shout out to the Russian character. We didn't bring him out.
I can't remember that actor's name, but he's spectacular.
When you first meet him, he's just like looking. He's like, I want this to eat. I want this to eat. And he's a big dude, right? So you know that he likes to eat. And then like I want a Cuban cigar.
Someone offers him a Cuban cigar.
No. Someone offers him a Jamaican cigar. He's like, I do not associate with imperialist stooges.
Right. That guy, the Russian ambassador, is in one of my favorite scenes in the movie, which is his initial scene, which ends with him and Turgison getting into this silly wrestling match where Turgison claims that he has this like hidden camera that he was taking pictures of in the war room, and it has one of my favorite lines in the movie, which is the president breaking up the fight by saying, "Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room."
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And I love the payoff in the end when it turns out that the Russian guy actually did have a hidden camera.
He had a backup hidden camera. Exactly.
Oh jeez.
And one of the other things there, like this was actually this is rare for Kubrick because he's a huge perfectionist when it comes to films, like even more than someone like Chaplin. Like he was very obsessed with focus in the frame. But there's the scene where Dr. Strangelove is like, his arm keeps like trying to heil, and he's like trying to hold it back, and then just keeps moving the wheel on his wheelchair back, and then he puts it to the side and he starts hitting it.
Right.
And you see he's in the background like he kind of like almost breaks into a smile, but he suppresses it back.
I did see that. The Russian ambassador is like biting his lip the whole time.
It was pretty impressive how he managed to come back from that. Like you see his whole face tighten, but then he relaxes. Yeah. Like at the end he gets ready, he's like, okay, I'm back.
Kubrick kept that in there on purpose. He thought it added a little bit of charm to the film. So yeah. All of the characters in this movie, it's just like they're all bringing their A game, and like it's not like they're particularly well written, but it's that they all represent something of like the theme, and they're all just hilarious in their own respect in all different ways because of what they represent.
I think you laid it out really well. Like it's not that they're necessarily like the most deep characters, but within a minute of spending time with them, you know exactly who they are.
Everything
about them. Like big, I guess. I was gonna say something really deep, but then it just went away.
They have very big.
I'm sad now because
it's okay.
Okay, someone else can go. I'm sad now.
I guess before we move on to the next thing, I just want to shout out to James Earl Jones. Probably his first acting gig, I believe. He doesn't say much.
It was really early on.
Gotta be. He looks so young in this movie.
It's amazing.
Like I think almost every movie I've seen him in, or in Star Wars case, heard him in, he's always had like age to him.
Yes.
Like you can hear it in his voice. Like this is a voice that's lived. Mm-hmm. Like it's so funny to hear that voice. Like you're like, he's so young. Like he's got to be like in his like mid-20s.
Probably.
Like, it's because I'm wondering like it's so funny. How old is he now? He's still voicing Vader on like the cartoons and whatnot,
really?
I think. Yeah.
What?
He was on the Rebel show. He showed up as Vader, and it was his voice.
That's awesome.
He is 88 years old.
Oh, good for him.
And Dr. Strangelove was his first film.
Woo!
It was.
That's awesome.
How old was he? Like, search up how old James Earl Jones was.
Well, he was. Let's see. It was 1964. That means He was born in 1931, so what was that? He was 33 years?
33, 32, yeah.
Wow.
Not
He
old.
started late,
Yeah,
man.
he started
His
late.
career, it's so funny, because his voice is very much the same. Like, you can hear Darth Vader in there, even though, he's a lot younger. You had something to say.
I found my thing that I was gonna say. They don't. Yeah, I'm happy now. They don't necessarily, all the characters in the film, they don't necessarily have like deep character, but they all have extravagant personalities. So
Yes.
you're able. It's like they're very exaggerated. So you really know who they are just because of how like exaggerated their personalities are, especially with like people like Turgison or Dr. Strangelove.
I'm glad you could get that out.
Yeah,
There we go.
You know what's funny about that? I know we need to move on, but
No, keep going.
that's a really good point you make, because that's almost one of the key things that makes the comedy in this movie work. It's that everything is exaggerated just enough that you're not quite sure whether to laugh out loud, like in a traditional comedy, or like be horrified.
Yeah.
Because the subject matter is nuclear war, the end of the world. But what makes it funny is everyone's operating just a little too much than what they should be in the movie.
Yeah, because when they lay out everything in the war room, when Turgison's like telling everything which is happening, you're like, he's done his homework and clearly like he knows what's happening. It's played pretty seriously, and like you're like, this could actually be how the president receives his information in the war room. But there's those little things in there that are just like, this is just funny. Like
the binder that says like total like things in megadeaths.
Megadeaths.
Just that word.
Yeah, exactly. Like all those stuff like that. It's just enough to make the movie hilarious.
Well,
So
I
yeah.
wouldn't condemn a full project just because of a single slip up.
All right, so yeah, let's tie that into to the movie being partially serious and partially comedic. So yeah, like what do you want to talk about for how that works? 'Cause
Honestly, it's from the opening credits. The movie sets the tone and, more importantly, the context of which it was made. This is a movie that was made in the heart of the Cold War. I think you mentioned like the Cuban Missile Crisis was only like
2 years earlier.
2 years old.
Meaning it was made like 1 year after. They're like,
Right.
hey, why don't we make a movie about nuclear war?
So the fact of the matter is that the movie was not dealing with this subject. You talked about this. This is not a movie dealing with a harsh subject after the fact. This is not Saving Private Ryan, which was made like years after World War II or years after D-Day. This is a movie that was made in the midst of it.
Because he made 2 other war movies. Paths of Glory was after World War I, I believe, or World War II. Forgive me if I don't know.
No, it's World War One, trench warfare.
And then you have Full Metal Jacket, which was about the
Right.
Vietnam War, but that was in the 90s. So, and it was funny. A lot of people were like, he's late to the party. Like, people already made.
Everybody's
Apocalypse
already
Now.
made every Vietnam War movie by the point he showed up.
Exactly. I still like that movie, but yeah, like, but this movie was like during it, so like you know that was gutsy to make a movie like when the war was still happening and when people were afraid. Like but you said this, like this is the whole thing. Like today, we laugh at all those videos in schools with like the turtle that they showed the kids, where they said like hide under your desk and put your hands over your head. It'll protect you from the nuclear fallout.
Right.
And just like this is a movie that's just saying this war is ridiculous. It's gonna kill all of us, and it introduces this idea of a doomsday machine of where they're trying to like get over each other for like the space race, the peace race, and the doomsday machine race. Like
they said that, like the peace race.
Honestly, one of the fun things about this movie, and I noticed it in the credits. Stanley Kubrick, along with directing it, has a screenwriting credit in the movie along with 2 other writers.
That's right.
And I remember reading that when he was originally given the book Red Alert, as he was reading it, he wanted to adapt the movie. He was like, I want to make this into a movie. But as he continued reading the book, and keep in mind, the book was written as a serious story.
It was.
It was not meant to be comedic in any way. As he was reading the story, he sort of discovered the comedy in it along with it. And by the time that he finished the book, he found himself laughing in a book that was not meant to be that way. So I think as the movie sort of finds the absurdity the further you go along with it, I think it's reflective of the way that the creators sort of found the comedy in the midst of like preparing to make a very serious movie about a very serious topic.
Like apparently in the book, there's a part where like the missiles are gonna go.
where they think a bomber's actually
the
going to attack.
president's like saying that they might just focus all their nukes on one city.
Right.
And they're basically, and he's saying, like, well, if we focus all our bombs on one city, then you can focus all your bombs on, like, one of our cities. Like a trade of bombs to a city.
Just
and,
for
like,
fairness
you could
sake.
think about that, and you could be like, yeah, that could be in this movie.
Right.
But it would be played up in a totally different context and manner. It would just be played up as hilarious and, like, ridiculous.
That's the funny thing. There's almost no jokey jokes in the movie.
No.
It's not like a movie where it's like, here's the setup, here's the punchline. It's characters saying things that are reflective of reality, reflective of, like, what at one point public policy was mutually assured destruction, otherwise known as MAD. Like, that's not a joke. That was something that was real, but the fact that they're just kind of like playing it up a little more, it makes it very clear how insane and how absurd and how darkly funny that is.
Yeah.
I think going back on how you guys say it, it's like how this is a movie, it's played serious-ish with some comedy in it. It's like this movie is like, the reactions you get is like a lot of awkward, like, giggles and shuffling in your seat, and then with occasional, like, bellows of laughter.
You're kind of laughing about how horrifying the subject matter is.
It kind of reminds me of Fargo. Like, that's the perfect case study of a dark comedy where, like, my laughs in that movie are usually like, just like
Right.
But, like, and then there's a few things where you laugh out loud, but you're like, should I be laughing out loud? Because this isn't really funny.
like,
Because you remember,
your
honestly, the scene that was for me, there's a scene where Sterling Hayden's character has barricaded his base off from the rest of the world, told his soldiers, if anyone tries to get on board, shoot them. And at one point, his soldiers surrender because enough of the army sends forces to overwhelm the defenders. And he's having this really serious, very sad conversation with Mandrake, where at one point he gets up, he takes his coat off, he walks into the bathroom, you realize what's going to happen before it happens, and then all you hear is a single gunshot, and then you see Mandrake try to open the door, and he can't because his body's blocking the door.
And then there's
cut after that, and I laughed, but I felt kind of bad for laughing because I was like, he just shot himself.
The reason why it's funny, it's not funny that he shot himself. It's funny that Mandrake opens the door, it stops, and then he does it like 3 more times. There's like stuff.
Like,
so you realize he's literally beating a dead corpse.
Like,
That's why it's funny.
Like, if the scene ended with him just opening the door and just, like, stopping and, like, freezing and looking at his dead body, it wouldn't have been funny. It would have been like, kind of like, oh, jeez.
Oh,
but
my
it's because
God.
of that, like, him, like,
Right.
trying to open it and stuff. That's where it gets really funny.
It's like almost like a childishness to how that scene ends.
And of course, the build-up with Mandrake just being like trying to reason with him, even though he knows he's completely insane.
I like
And just
the
being like,
hilarity in Mandrake, where he's he's kind of going crackers as well, because he's kind of laughing at, like, I'm trapped in a room with someone who's absolutely insane.
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
All right. Going back, just one last thing. How you guys said that no one at the time would make a movie about the subject that, the political subjects at the time, like, nukes and stuff like that.
Right.
And this movie did that, right? I feel like a little connection to something that happened in recently. I guess this movie isn't as good as Dr. Strangelove, but The Interview kind of did the same thing, where it brings up Kim Jong-un, and it makes fun of Kim Jong-un in the movie, and they kill Kim Jong-un in the movie. And this, there was like a big, I guess it was not a riot against that, but there was like threats.
It's so funny.
The studio that made the movie got hacked by North Korea.
Exactly.
They were trying to censor the movie, and it's so funny because you're like, it's just a movie, but a little bit more sensitive subject matter. But yeah, I'm like, I was talking about that like really, like, this movie's freaking lightning in a bottle. Like, the concept is lightning in a bottle, and just how ingenious, like, the idea of this movie was. Like, I don't think you could handle anything else like that. Like, I'm like, the equivalency would be terrorism in today's world. Like that.
I was about to say that. There's a movie that I'm trying to remember the name of it. I think it's called like 3 Lions or something. And it's about I think it's like 3 brothers who are suicide bombers.
Ooh.
And it's a dark comedy about terrorism that was made shortly after, like, the kind of the war on terror like was no longer like a hot war, but it was like kind of settling into kind of the warm war it's been since then. And I've heard that it's incredible because it's not like straight up farce, but it's strangely amusing for a movie about a very unamusing topic in our lives today.
Wow, I need to see that. I haven't heard of it.
When I watched Doctor Strangelove, I was trying to think of ways that you could like make a Doctor Strangelove for terrorism. And the only way that I could think of is like maybe doing a What We Do in the Shadows for it, where you have like a pad of like suicide bombers, or like terrorists,
or that you're kind of isolated in their world.
So you're isolated in your world, and you're like kind of seeing the hilarity of what's going on.
Yeah,
that was the only way I could think of how you could like play it up as funny.
If I can figure out what the name of the movie is, Evan can put it in the description of this video because I've wanted to see it for a while, and I've always remembered that it's a dark comedy about a group of suicide bombers.
I definitely need to look into that, yeah. But like, you know...
Sounds like something that would be an SNL sketch.
Right.
It's difficult to make any movies that are like this, but I'm like, that's the thing. It's just, it's really clever.
Because you're trying to bridge the gap between like offensive and like not offensive.
Is this going to make people upset, or like, is this going to be funny? Like, you know, you're taking a risk.
It's what the best late night stuff does. Like when the Colbert Report was on, like, one of my favorite things about a show like that, or The Daily Show when Jon Stewart was running it, is there would always like balance this gambit between going a little too far with a very fresh subject but still dealing with the subject. So there was almost like a catharsis in the laughter because it was almost like taking the stress out of a very scary subject, because you'd have like a guy that would show up on TV and make goofy faces about it. So it almost felt like it was almost like a release from kind of the stress that you have from like hearing about horrible stuff in the news and stuff like that. Like that's almost what the best kind of dark comedy does. It almost acts as like a release valve for your stresses.
Like sometimes going too far can actually be funny. Because it's more, it's not like funny in itself is going too far. It's more like, oh, they just said that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's that little joke that people needed, but they maybe they didn't expect anyone to say out loud.
Yeah,
right.
That's what this entire movie is. All right, let's talk about sex because sex is all over this movie,
Let's
and
talk about the birds and the bees.
like.
Are we gonna get demonetized on YouTube now?
Yeah, oh my gosh, like the opening credits we talk about this, it is a plane being refueled, and like that first bit, you're like, that is a penis. Like look at it, it's like and like it's the same thing for Ripper's cigar. Like it's like angled upwards like that, and like
I love the point where he blew something out and then he put it back in and then he grimaced.
Right.
I burst out laughing.
It's if you tried if you want to put someone in a coma, just set up a drinking game for Doctor Strangelove where it's like every time you see a phallic symbol, drink.
Like people search up a plane being refueled. I'm pretty sure Evan is gonna put a picture like right now, but like you need to see it happen.
What was the song that was backing it?
It's called Try a Little Tenderness. I forgot the band. And it's all romantic, and like you said, the coffee shop font, like that scene is played out like a romance, like something
because
like
it's
sexy.
layer upon layer of ridiculousness. Because you get the seriousness of planes refueling and it's like bombs are about to do, and then you get the tender music, and then you get the coffee shop font, and then you get the slight sexual imagery. It's like layer upon layer of how ridiculous everything's.
This was the funny thing, though. This movie is PG, and obviously, like at this point, the PG-13 rating didn't exist. But I was like, I am amazed of how much they get away with this movie. Like, there's nothing explicit. That's the thing. Yeah. There's nothing explicitly sexual that's really shown. Like, there's a woman in a bikini. You see a couple of of pretty tame Playboy models, like shown in a magazine. But most of it is just innuendo. It's the performances themselves, and then some like errant pictures every once in a while.
Yeah.
And the innuendos themselves. A lot of innuendos now, they seem to be like dangling over your face, like, see?
It's very
it's
on
there. It's there. Inside of this, it's like the innuendo is so ingrained into the story. You have to kind of dig to finally
that's
figure
right.
it out.
It's like they don't turn
you have
off.
to put your sex brain on to figure out what's going on.
They don't halt the movie so the innuendo can happen.
Yeah.
The innuendo is literally a part of the film.
Yes.
And it's like, yeah, it's integrated so perfectly because it's not like they're trying to pander to the adults or give them a little something they want to see. It's like, here's this, and a kid could watch this movie and be none the
Have any
wiser.
of you ever had the unfortunate experience of watching the Angry Birds movie?
Yes.
No.
I have. Twice. I
There
saw
are
it in
so many
theaters.
points.
There are a lot of
I
innuendos
talked
in
to
that.
an adult once about it on a baseball team or something, and she said she liked it. I remember, and she was like, "Yeah, I liked it. It was funny." And I think the reason why is because of all the adult kind of jokes in there.
There's a
because there are
lot.
a lot of points where they just halt the story and put something that's it's hard to tell when something's definitively cringe-worthy.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I can say that it's cringe so bad where they're such an obvious innuendo. It feels like they stopped the story just to give that to the adults.
Right.
So the adults can be like, yay, there it is.
The innuendos in Doctor Strangelove, they're not out there as we said.
Exactly.
They're more akin to those those colorblind tests with all the dots.
Yeah.
It's like those. You have to really look at it.
That's a really great way to put
Yeah.
it. It's almost do you remember those old books from the 90s where you have to kind of
That's
cross your
right.
eyes a little bit and then you can see a rabbit?
Yes.
This weird, thing,
Those.
Yeah. It's
And
right there
then
in front of
you
you.
can't unsee it. Because
Exactly.
once you see it, it's oh, it's that. And then you're like, wait a minute. Oh.
Exactly.
Oh.
It's like when you look at the cover of The Little Mermaid and you're like, oh, that's a penis.
That's a penis. Or the Lion King, the original Lion King poster, you see the backside of a naked woman.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Those are hilarious. That's what all the sex is like. And so I remember seeing this. The first time I watched this was actually in a film class, and somebody noted the inherent sexuality of war and and how war relates to dominance and penetration. Right. And I'm and that is what a lot of this film is played for. The final act of the film is Kong riding a bomb into the climax of the film.
And he has the cowboy hat. He's slapping the hole.
Exactly. That's what a lot of the imagery is, and how the way scenes play out. The war in this film, it relates to,
and just the way that war is talked about.
Yeah.
I think honestly the one thing that keeps coming back to me is how the one chunk of the movie that's not funny at all are the scenes of the American soldiers attacking Ripper's base.
Yeah.
Because it's shot with handheld and it almost looks like archive footage of World War II.
Yeah.
It's very harrowing. There's vehicles on fire. You don't see many deaths like you would in a traditional Hollywood movie where it'd be very visceral and horrifying, but you get the sense that real bullets are flying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
People are going to die.
Yeah.
And then you get cut scenes to these guys in the war room getting all fired up talking about taking out the Ruskies. It's talked about in honestly sports terms. It's talked about with this intensity and this sense of frustration and when you contrast that to how an actual war looks, you're it's really just this is this what it's about? Just a bunch of sexually frustrated men taking out their anger on each other.
And something that I love about the seriousness versus the ridiculousness in Doctor Strangelove. Sometimes there is this thing that's super serious, Kong the ship. But there's always that one little element that's kind of ridiculous, inside of the safe. There's the pictures of the women, and in those war pictures and war stuff. There's this sign that keeps on coming up that says peace is our profession or something.
Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah. Almost forgot about that.
It's basically in every shot with that in it.
Right.
And it's so funny because you're getting these literal war scenes and then you just see this big billboard sign that says peace is our profession.
My favorite one is when you cut to Ripper's office. He has this intimidating looking black military flag behind him.
Right.
But at the top, in big bold letters, is peace is our profession.
it's like that's clearly on purpose. Like pretty much every single shot they dedicate that is just like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So let's finish off by talking about the ending of this movie.
Yes,
so
beautiful.
the world ends. Like not many directors do this in movies. Like it's rare that you get someone who pulls this off. This is like arguably the best nuclear bomb scene in a movie is when Kong rides the bomb, and then at the end you have the doomsday machine going off, which they've teased this entire movie long. They've been saying like the Russians invented a machine that'll basically like destroy all life on Earth. It'll cover the world in like cobalt tholium G.
Right.
Like, and like
I love that scene where like what's his name? Is that Kiss Off?
Premier Kissoff is the Russian he's the Russian guy on the phone.
Yeah.
He's the Russian premier.
Who's the is he just the prime minister?
I think does the Russian ambassador ever given a name?
I forgot
He
what his
might
name
just
is.
be the Russian ambassador. Is it?
so.
Oh no, it's I think it's Alexei.
And that's right,
Alexei, yeah.
Well, either way, like when the Russian ambassador is like laying out what the doomsday machine is, I love how he like talks about how like it was passed in Congress and like it was they're talking about like some people didn't want it. It was like who wanted this?
And even better, like he talks about how it was essentially like a cost saving mechanism. Like he was like talking about like our people were complaining because all you Americans have like dishwashers and like automatic dryers, so we had to give them what they wanted and cut down on the military spending. Like you're just like, you created a bomb that kills the world because you wanted to save money.
Yeah, it's all hilarious. That's the thing. It's like it ends with nuclear bombs destroying the world. It's all this just big old montage over a Vera Lynn song. But what makes it funny is the fact that everything else that you've seen in the movie, you're like, this is what all this built up to.
Right.
Like, this is why the war started. It wasn't because, like, we hated each other inherently. It was because
one man,
Yeah.
General Jack D. Ripper, had a bad sex experience, and then he went off talking about fluids and tried to destroy Russia and the world.
And everyone else, like, and just a lot of inherently, like, unlucky scenarios, like Kong's ship being hit by the missile and not getting the recall code, because he literally thinks that they've taken out Washington.
Yeah.
Like, that's his assumption that, like, he's like, this would only be happening if, like, they literally had, like, completely leveled, like, big parts of America.
It has nothing to do with like politics or like the kind of the political structures or anything. It's basically a bunch of characters that are thinking way too much about sex and are making a bunch of stupid decisions because of it.
Yeah, and there's that last bit I remember I was watching with you guys. We were all laughing at the beginning. That scene actually goes on for a while, and I think that's on purpose. There's like that last little bit where we kind of stopped laughing, and it isn't necessarily like despair filled. It's like that last little droplet of hope and also comedic.
Right.
Is that Dr. Strangelove has that insane plan, but it's just like it never ends where you're like, oh, the world just ended. It's kind of just like, well, I guess we'll see what happens.
Most of the reason because of that is because Dr. Strangelove, he does have a plan.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
an
Let's
insane
talk about the plan. Let's
but
talk
it is
about
a
the
plan.
plan.
This is... Can I just
reason
make
why
one
the
thing
movie's
that's
called
really
Dr.
funny?
Strangelove.
Yes.
Okay, so let me set the stage here. So basically right after Kong has detonated his bomb and they all know, okay, doomsday device is going off, the world is screwed. Dr. Strangelove wheels up in his wheelchair and he's like, all right, let me tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna put all of our like top military and scientists in the deepest mine shafts in the world. We're gonna like gather up some people. We'll use computers to pick out like the best people, the people that will be like the most hardworking, smartest, the most sexually fertile, and put them underneath the ground. It just keeps going and going and going. And something I noticed that it made me laugh so hard the first time I noticed it. There's a point where all of a sudden, like, Strangelove is like in the middle of his thing. He's getting more and more animated. All of a sudden his eyes like double in size. He looks down. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's getting excited. That's crazy.
I especially loved when he's like, we will have 10 females for every one male. And that's where you're like, oh, okay, I see where this is going.
It cuts back to the president with Turgeson next to him. Turgeson is like looking up at him like with like this like look of awe, and you're just like, oh my gosh.
And you have Alexi's one line where he says like, you have a fascinatingly great idea. I forgot the exact
And I love how the entire scene, the hand, like the fabled pan with the black glove, is like trying to wheel away.
Right.
He's like trying to wheel away his wheelchair, like just so that he can get away.
At one point, he just like straight up hiles. He's like, ah!
And he's like, his other hand grabs the hand, he just tries to put it down, and then he beats.
But before he
tries to choke himself.
But before the real end, you know, where we see all the explosions going off, before the real end, we have the final line, which is like my Führer, I can walk.
Dr. Strange has been in a wheelchair this whole time, and then once he gets excited, I think he has the proposition like for his plan or something. He just gets up out of his wheelchair, takes some wobbly steps, and then he's about to say something, and then he looks down and he's like, "My Führer, I can walk."
What a funny contrast. This movie ends with a miracle that cuts directly to the apocalypse.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And that's the funny thing. Like, traditionally, I don't like movies where just everybody dies.
Yeah.
Like, those tend to just kind of feel like a bummer for no reason. I can't think of a single movie I've watched where I had the biggest smile on my face as all the world's nukes just go off, and it's like, yay, the world died!
This is the best, worst ending ever. Like, you know, those, like, most endings where everyone dies, you said you're depressed, you're like, wow, all that for nothing.
Right.
Or maybe you like reflect on humanity,
Yes,
where you're like,
yeah.
you know, what is life, or like what is the value of the universe? But like it's different with this movie. It's it's context of the film.
There's something joyful
Yes.
about the just utter end of all this absurdity.
Yeah.
And I love how Turgidson, even when the end of the world plan is still being laid out, he's still worried about communist infiltration. And he's like saying, like, the communists will come in and they'll take our mine shafts.
That was one of my favorite lines where it was like, they're gonna outbreed us and like take us over when we all emerge from our mine shafts.
Outbreed us. Yeah. And then you have the Russian ambassador is actually a spy, so like, I think that's one of the reasons why, like, the end of the world in this case works so well, is because there's still all these unanswered questions and all these things that are, like, still possible. So, like, there's hope, but then there's also the despair of nuclear war, then there's also the despair of, like, maybe the Russians are gonna take us over, and, like, maybe this plan's not even gonna work in the first place.
And that's the thing. Nobody learns anything. After this whole movie that basically, like, makes a mockery of the approach to nuclear weapons and the approach to geopolitics. Nobody has learned their lesson at the end of this movie.
Yeah, there isn't really any arc for any character.
No.
Like
Everyone's
everything
stagnant, but it works just because of how ridiculous the plot is.
Right.
And how
No,
ridiculous
that's the strange thing. I
everything
just
is.
realized this. Like, we were talking about how, like, the characters aren't necessarily deep, but they're exaggerated enough that they're really memorable. No one has an epiphany.
Yes.
No one has a moment of realization. Everybody just goes through the movie as they would normally, like, react to in the normal situations. Nobody has, like Kong doesn't have an epiphany about, like, my God, what am I doing? Like, he literally rides a bomb to the end and is directly responsible for the end of the world.
I think in the end, Kong had the biggest, like, arc, because if you think about it, okay, so I think for at least half or a third of the movie, he is like, he has his helmet on and he's
Right.
he's just normal and stuff, and then he switches his hat and becomes more like, let's do this.
Right,
That's
and-
the biggest arc.
And you make a really good point. In any traditional movie, he would be the hero. At the very end, like, he does, like, that thing that happens at the end of every movie where, like, something goes wrong, they can't drop the weapon, they can't do this, and he goes in there, he's, like, fiddling with the circuits, and, like, at the last second, he's able to open the doors, and in an act of self-sacrifice, he manages to destroy the bad guy's base. He's the traditional hero, cowboy of a movie, but in this context,
he literally
Armageddon.
didn't get the message.
No!
It's like
he literally just, like, unintentionally causes the end of everything.
And I love that point when, like, you first introduced to Kong. It's almost like the thing where, like, you get the personality in, like, a minute.
Yes.
They're talking about how they got the air code, not air code, they got the code, and it's, like, the red thing. Like, Plan R.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they talk to Kong, they say, hey, we got Plan R. And he's like, are you sure about that?
Right.
Like, and then he's like, I'm going to come down there and make sure. And then
You know what it honestly reminds me of?
he's like insulting them. He's like, stop doing a prank and all that.
There was a clip from an interview. I think it was from It was from Josh Whedon's commentary for Avengers: Age of Ultron. He was talking about how towards the tail end of that movie, you've seen Age of Ultron?
No,
right?
I have not.
Okay.
Don't suggest it. It's bad.
So I'm not gonna go into the details, but basically there's a point where there are two artificial intelligence characters in the movie, and at one point one of those characters develops a change, and a new artificial intelligence is brought in. And Josh was trying to talk about like, how do I introduce this character in a way that will like stick with the audience, even though I don't have a lot of time. And he's like, I got it, an accent. So he hired an actress who was Irish because the accent alone added like enough that it was memorable. You didn't need a full character. You just needed that little bit. That's, I think, what you're kind of getting at. Slim Pickens has this really thick Texas accent. So it's not necessarily like his lines are really deep. It's just something about that accent. You get everything you need to know about that character just from how he sounds.
Exactly.
Oh man.
I don't know if you want to. We
That's good right
we
there.
can keep going if you want, but because we could talk about this forever. But if you want to close
It's
out,
tremendous. I mean, like,
yeah. Do you want to just keep talking randomly or what? Like,
I don't know. I mean, what are we in an hour?
yeah.
Wow, man, that felt like 15 minutes. I love it. This movie's so good. Like,
It is.
There's so much we could talk about. Like, it's, I don't know. I think that for me, what's interesting about this movie is I've traditionally found that some of my favorite movies are really hard to classify. Like, I love movies like Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
Where
about to say
it's
that.
hard to really say, what kind of movie is this? Is it a comedy? Is it a drama?
Yeah, because when you watch it, you're like, oh, it's a comedy. But then you go back, you're like, no,
Right.
not really.
There's some
It's
sad
like,
emotional scenes.
yeah, it's
in
like
there.
it's a bit of an out.
I think Evan and I just watched Every Frame Painting video that said that, like, where like sometimes movies will try to do a bunch of these genres at once, but that doesn't work. You kind of have to like invent your own genre for this to work.
That is a perfect way to put it. This movie is a genre of its own. It's this dark, dramatic comedy about war and about the most absurd kind of war, a war that nobody can win.
Yeah.
And I don't know, there's something special about it. I've seen this movie probably 5 or 6 times at this point.
This is my third time. Yeah.
Every time I've seen it, it's funny. Every time I've seen it, different things make me laugh more.
Those are the best comedies where it's not just the delivery of lines, like it's everything else. It's the details and it's the little bits that stick out in your mind.
When there's new things to discover. And I mean, what's fun about this podcast is we have 3 people that have seen this movie multiple times. One person has never seen this movie before.
This is your first time.
And we all took all these different things away from it, but we all took kind of the one key thing, which is like, this movie's great.
Yes.
Like, what a great, crazy movie from the 60s that holds up perfectly well in today's day and age.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it is not aged one bit, and that's the thing, man. You can talk about performances, you can talk about direction, but yeah, this movie's just fun.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun overall, and like it's a lot of. I've been watching Kubrick, and I'm like, a lot of his movies don't really seek to entertain. Like that's what I find with a lot of his movies. They're very thematically strong, and this movie is. But the execution was just completely fun. Like you said that if you like look at photos and like behind the scenes stuff, it felt more like Kubrick was just having a good time.
He looks like a different director. You see him smile. He has the big goofy cigar in his mouth, like making cameras at the face. Like there's a warmth to this movie.
Cameras at the face.
Making faces to the camera.
That's staying in.
Like when I think of Kubrick traditionally, I think of The Shining.
Yes.
Like cold and clinical, and it works for that movie, and it works for many of his movies. But
the behind the scenes, you're like, yeah, this guy is not very friendly. But but in this, you're just like, it does not seem like he was as like restrictive, that he cared quite as much, that he like restricted his actors or wanted things to go exactly his way. He was fine just letting things play out like that. Seriously, where he like lets the little grin from Alexi stay in there. Like he would cut that out at any other time. He would use a different take, but he didn't. He's like, I'll just put that in there. It's charmful.
He's having fun. This is a movie where the warmth and the playfulness of this kind of like super overly serious director kind of comes out, and it's fun. It's fun to discover something outside of a director you didn't know before.
After this deep and meaningful conversation about directors, I want to talk about gum.
Oh, there's a lot of gum in this film.
Because there's a character, Buck Turgerson, who, once he's introduced into the war room, starts eating a piece of gum. Then eats another one. Then eats another one.
And he's
by
like,
the end,
he's chewing. Yeah. Like through almost all of his dialogue. It's like,
he's chewing hard. Like, and it's hilarious. And like by the end, he's eaten like 2 packs of juicy fruit gum. And
Right.
It's hilarious.
What is the symbolism behind gum?
I remember
that it's a huge.
Well, there's a symbolism of like hunger and like food with food in there.
Because there's also like the 9 packages of gum inside
Right.
of all the like emergency containers in the thing.
and everyone in this movie sort of deals with the stress differently. Like Turgis chews gum. Every time I saw Mandrake, he kind of like was hunched over. His arms are like tight to his chest. Like he looks like really uncomfortable. He almost looks like, you know, kids when they're sitting in those seats outside of the principal's office.
Yeah.
Like he looks like that. He looks like he's almost like, am I in trouble?
Yes.
He's
like obviously Ripper
And
has
Dr.
a cigar.
Strangelove is getting off on it.
Oh gosh, yeah, it's
like the thought of mass destruction is like, whoa. Like when he's talking about this, he's like, you know, all caressing his cheek. He's just like, his eyes are all wide, and he's like, you know, twitching around, just like, yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah. Do you want to wrap up around now?
yeah. I mean,
Yeah, I think-
there's so much to discover in this movie. If you haven't seen it, you gotta
I'll,
see it.
I'll start an outro. Just
Thank you for having me. First of all, Evan.
Absolutely, thank you for being here. This is it's fun
man.
it's fun to mix it up with.
Oh
this.
yeah, definitely.
yeah. Hopefully, if you guys were listening to this and you've seen Doctor Strangelove, if you haven't seen it, and if you have, recommend it to other people. Like this. I think this is one of Kubrick's better movies. Like in all honesty, I'm going through all of his movies to make a video of my own. But I like. From what I've seen thus far, and I've seen a lot of his movies, this is my favorite of his. It's just, it's so hilarious, and there's like something about it which is like unlike any of his other films and unlike any other film, period. It's like, it's a wholly unique film, and I'd recommend it to anybody. So
And shout out to Criterion. We watched it on Criterion, which just released the Blu-ray of it.
Yeah.
It looks phenomenal. There was a scene where I think there was a close-up on Sterling Hayden's face.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that looks crystal clear.
absolutely,
This was filmed far before high definition was a thing, and it looked just perfectly clear.
yeah. A lot of the Criterions are fantastic. Yeah, definitely the Blu-ray looks great. Holy crap! Yeah, we could talk about this movie forever, and I'm glad we got
Don't
to
tempt
talk
us.
for a good bit. Yeah, so. All right, thank you for listening. This has been Three Brothers Movie Reviews. We'll see you guys next time for more reviews or podcasts. And thank you, Ricardo Rodriguez, for sticking around. He might come back for different reviews. So until next time, we'll see you guys later. Bye.
See you guys.
Bye-bye.
See ya.
We'll meet again. Don't know where. Don't know where.